I'm going to verbally go over some of the cues to remember for the restorative sequence. Yesterday we went over 1 through 4 in the manual, which is all on video, so you can go through that in your own time. But what I'm going to do for the workshop today, which we have this extra 2-hour chunk. Let's go to the first page of the outline, which says aerial yoga play, and then it'll say introduction, yoga translations, etc. And then the 12 yoga translations, 1 through 4, that's what we go over in the first day of the basic training. So what I'll do is, as close as possible that I can manage it, with the group, I'm going to go through 1 through 4. So the first hour of the workshop, we'll go over that and review the basic training. So we'll get to experience that again. And then, of course, we'll have time later to write it out and review it and watch the videos and that kind of thing. So we're not going to write out a bunch of stuff through 1 through 4 right now. There are some descriptions in the manual, as well as you can pause the videos and get into some of the poses. But let's just take the last page and go over the restorative and talk about what we did today, which was really fun. We talked about what are the important things to pay attention to in that process, as well as how can we address individual needs. And this is, like I mentioned previously, usually the teacher training is a 3-day training where we cover 20 hours. It's like pretty full on. So when we have 6 days and this nice retreat-like setting, we get to kind of slow it down and have little tiny bites, little chunks to go over. So we typically don't have day 2 in the basic training to go over this restorative practice. So that's what makes it super special, to kind of dig in and learn some more things that I've kind of been wanting to do it this way, but obviously most people don't have a week, right, to go on retreat. It's like we have a weekend, we do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I do this once a month in the Bay Area and different cities. So with the lounging, so we're just going to go through it with number 1. It says lounging, and then it says hammock stretch. So in the lounging pose, we get into it with the knees. Okay, so when we have the leg loops at the knees, it's called chillaxing. When we have leg loops at the ankles, we call it floating Buddha. So just think Buddha for the ankles and knees chillaxing. So we get into the lounging position by coming into chillaxing pose, which is also number 2. And then to do the hammock stretch, so the lounging is going from side to side, right, holding onto the leg loops and then shifting onto the thigh. So one of the other things to remember there is we can spread out the leg loops from the knee to the upper thigh. If there's any discomfort or pain with the pressure, we're actually triggering the meridian points behind the knees, which is actually very good for the lower back and healing the knees. But not too many people actually like that sensation until they start to get, until they get the relief, and then they're like, oh yeah, this is great. So until they know why it's so important to put pressure on these parts of the bodies, we just give them a break. So we get into the lounging, number 1, with the leg loops at the knees. We can spread them out. We hold on to the handholds. We hold on to the leg loops with our hands and shift from side to side. Super easy. It's a great way to open up the hips. Since this is restorative, we're not going to do anything too crazy. In the workshop, you'll see how the lounging sequence moves into dancing Shiva, which is number 4 in the translations, and that's a much more advanced sequence that we'll go over. So from lounging, we can push the leg loops down to the ankles and do the hammock stretch. So that in the hammock stretch, we cross the ankles. So we take the extra leg loop, we either put it behind the neck or underneath both arms, and that allows us to lean back. Okay, so hammock is really great. You can spread everything out. You can play with expanding the swing, expanding the leg loops, shifting from side to side, getting into a deeper back bend. There's a whole 5-minute variations. And then I always just do both sides because you will notice that most people have asymmetry in the body, and one side will be easier or harder than the other. So even if it's the same pose, you can handle them both sides. So that's number 1. Great way to start a class. Actually, you're going to have to walk them through getting the swing behind the back and chillaxing, right? But you can have lounging be like the main event. right? Lounging hammock. So number 2, chillaxin. Moving into a supported back bend series. So I showed you guys how to get into the chill flow. So in the chill flow, leg loops at the knees, we're going to squeeze into a child's pose, and then we're going to blossom open into star. So why don't we go ahead, because this is in the manual, why don't we go ahead and look at number 4. So you're going to see, we're going to go past floating Buddha, and then we're going to wind up on page 11. It should be number 11 for everybody. There is a table of contents in the beginning, but and then you'll see right above the chillaxin flow, you'll see the hammock pose, which I teach as a bonus. Okay? We're also going to go into the one leg stretches today, like I mentioned yesterday we would go over today, so we'll go over those in the workshop. Amy, I'm mentioning that too. We'll go over the one leg stretches. Remember I said I'll save them for day 2?
Yes.
So we'll go over that in the workshop as well. Okay, so in the chillaxin flow, there's there's a sequence that we do where, we first just swing from side to side. This way we're working with the connective tissue, like really letting there be length and space through the spine. Then we go from our child's pose into our star position. So in the star position, that's our first real surrender. So it's like opening to grace. I like to say opening up to receptivity. So we open up to this gesture of opening the arms, opening the heart, opening the legs, and then we come back in and close again. So we do that a few times to undulate the spine, just like in Hatha Yoga, Hatha. We go from a yang pose to a yin pose. And then from there, hands come to prayer. We come into the reverse namaste. So legs squeeze together, we push the hips up. So if we're looking at page 11, you'll see the sequence there, the different pictures, if you want a visual cue. Otherwise, I can do it in the swing if you guys need me to. Just answer. Yeah. And we'll go over it again in the workshop, and it'll all just make sense with repetition. This is what we want to do, is master the basics through frequency of frequency. So the more that we repeat something, the more it becomes ingrained, and it just becomes second nature. Especially chillaxin. That's going to be the number 1 pose for people. Like anybody can do it. Floating Buddha is a little bit more advanced because as we move away from our center point, it gets more challenging. So leg loops at the hips is the easiest. Knees is a little bit harder. Ankles are harder still. And then the most challenging is when it's at the arches of the foot. So we have to engage to keep the heart. Okay, so namaste moves into our ladle position. Our ladle position is our first really big back bend, where the swing slides down to the waist. Very important detail. Before we bend the knees and reach back and grab for the ankles, we have to make sure it's in the sweet spot. Otherwise, it's going to feel uncomfortable when we go back to grab our feet. So that's number 2. So we want to get into, the purpose of using the chillaxin pose is to come into some sort of supported back bend. The lounging position is really for opening up the hips, right? So when we really get to expand through the hip flexors, by letting gravity kind of let the weight of the legs sink down, it really opens up the psoas and the hips. The hammock is just for fun. The hammock stretch is just, it's stretching our well-being. Okay, and then folded leaf is number 2. So the restorative are not exactly in the same, so it's number 2 in the manual would start at page 7. So folded leaf. So we usually get, as much as possible, smooth transitions. So we can get from our chillaxin pose into folded leaf by removing the leg loops, coming into a sumo squat. And then we're going to hook at the elbows and come forward into the wide straddle. Okay. So from the elbow hook, which is 2A, which is the picture you're seeing there, we're just going to let our body sway from side to side, and then we're going to do the twists coming up. And we will definitely repeat all that in the workshop today. Okay, so from the elbow hooks, doing both sides, bringing the swing overhead, then we stand straight up and we want to stretch the swing down to the hip flexors. Now it's really important to emphasize the difference between where the legs insert into the pelvis and where the bladder is.
Yeah.
Most people are going to have the swing above their hips. We want it below the hips. And it'll just be very uncomfortable on the sensitive organs if they have it too high. So you'll immediately be able to tell by people's body language. If it feels awkward, it is awkward. So folded leaf is the way that we can suspend from the hip flexors and come into a supported headstand. Now in folded leaf, we can try to spread the swing out a little bit, but usually keeping it bunched up at the hip flexors is really the best choice. So there is that option to do like the mermaid, where it covers the whole belly. Some people that I work with that are heavier, they need the swing spread out over a larger surface area. They're not going to be able to handle the intensity. It will be too much squeeze for their limbs.
Where's folded leaf?
We're working on number 2 in the forward fold, so we're on page 8 right now.
Okay.
So page 7 was the wide straddle forward fold with the elbow hooks. Page 8 is when we move into forward folds.
That's your forward leaf?
Yeah,
Just
so
looking at the words.
yeah, so folded leaf, it's kind of like an acro pose. So folded leaf is right here where our forearms are down. So we come into the forward fold, and then folded leaf is with the feet, and then that moves into down dog. Yeah, no problem. So down dog is the natural progression from there. But because we're doing just the restorative version, in the workshop you'll see the down dog leads to the cat's meow, and that whole kind of, it's almost like a chaturanga sequence. But in folded leaf, our choice is to bend our knees and come into a supported headstand. And that could be a really relaxed headstand, or we can really create the tripod and try to get our hips a little further over our head. We can just decide on the experience of the person how far we want to take them to inversion. I have to tell you, people are afraid to be upside down. I don't know what happened. We were upside down in a womb. We came out upside down. We're supposed to be upside down. This is my genuine reality. And then all of a sudden, you tell somebody to get their head even like in a forward fold, you can feel the discomfort of lifting their legs up. Yeah, there's a stress response in the body, particularly headstand, handstand, which I prefer to be in headstand, handstand whenever physically possible. So getting something like this where they really do feel safe is very important. But at the same time, it's really important to teach the anchors and the hold. So, if you're in folded leaf and your legs go up towards the sky, people do not know what way is up or down when their head is towards the ground. It's very strange, but it happens to 90% of the people, so it must be some sort of wiring. So they start to lift their legs up. Their legs just float, like in acro yoga. I'm assuming you're doing acro yoga, so yeah. People's legs just start to float up towards the sky, and if they do that, they're going to slide off the base, right? So we want to keep that natural L shape, or right angle in the body, so the legs stay heavy. So that's why when we come into upside down dog, everyone wants to push their feet towards the sky. I say pull your feet down towards your sit bones. Keep your feet low towards your glutes, because they'll just start to float up. And if they do, they'll slide out. They're not going to go far. Their hands are on the ground. But still, we want to create the sense of safety that they're hooked in.
Is there like a most common kind of accident or problem?
0 accidents under my supervision, but I'm pretty hypey. I have my eye on every single person, and I usually teach 8 to 10 people. I just did Beloved Festival with 60 people and brought 28 swings.
Wow. So
there were like 2 people per swings and people switching and all that. And even then, and I had a couple assistants, everybody played safely when I'm there. Obviously, the biggest error that I see, and I'll just show you, is that people don't know the difference between the inside and outside of the swing. And this is really important to go over. This is the inside. This is the outside of the swing. Okay? So, if I'm here, and I hook my feet inside in, I don't have an anchor.
Right.
So when I say hook your foot outside in, then I have an anchor.
Yeah,
I'm
they're
locked
upside
in.
down and they're fighting and understanding.
Well, just the idea that this is the inside, this is the outside. Same thing. 90% of the people I work with, when I have them hook their legs outside in, they go inside out and hook like this. Now tell